Good evening. I believe this is session 6. Now we're just going on. As we mentioned before, the first 24 days of Kislev are a build-up to Chanukah. Chanukah does not begin on the 25th alone. It is a process we build towards beginning from Rosh Chodesh Kislev, so we got to do whatever we can to prepare ourselves and to be ready for it, because it's a real opportunity where the people understand this, where they relate to it, connect to it, but it's a very special opportunity for phenomenal growth. And if you just show up, like anything in Judaism, everything comes down to hachana. You learn from Shabbos that it's all in the preparation. As the Gemara says, if someone prepares Erev Shabbos, they will eat on Shabbos. If someone does not prepare Erev Shabbos, then what will they eat? And it's a metaphor for all of life, that the world to come, of course, there's no way to fix things up in the world to come. You have to do all the fixing up right now. As the Mishnah says, this world is the pros door, is the corridor to the world to come, and don't get hung up on all the distractions and sideshows along the way, but work on yourself to prepare for the world to come, as abstract and distant a concept that may seem to be. And likewise, when it comes to the Chagim, the holidays, they are not just commemorations. These are things that are pointed out on all levels, that some holidays just commemorate in the world, but our holidays are more than that. Every Chag, every holiday is a portal. It's a specific light that does not exist right now every day in any obvious way in our world, in our level right now. But we have a special opportunity in Chanukah time to access the light of Yosef Mashiach. It's the messianic light. The light of Chanukah is not just a great thing happened, there's a miracle, and they were heroic and all that, but the energy that was in the world at that time specifically, and we'll talk a bit more about this in upcoming sessions, God willing, because there's many different layers to this discussion, because there's the whole idea of Torah Shabbal Peh, the oral law, and the role that plays versus Greek philosophy, and all the different elements that go into the holiday of Chanukah. But it's not just that people rose to the occasion, but it was more to do with the fact that there was a specific energy in the world at that time that most people missed. They weren't ready for it. They didn't understand it. And that's part of what we'll talk about tonight, how God will stimulate things, will push us, will make events happen in life because he wants us to take advantage of that opportunity. And the door opened. The window opened, the portal opened, just like a wormhole, so to speak, in outer space, where if you travel through it, you can go from one end to another end much faster than you normally physically can, because it's a portal of some sort. And here it's a portal of time, it's a portal of light that opens up, a door opens up. In a sense, what you're looking at when Chanukah begins, it's like the door opens and you're looking into Yosef Mashiach. It's like a science fiction movie where you open the front door and what you expect to find is not there. Instead, you're looking, 6,000 miles. How does that happen? Does that work? How do I look out the window and see so far away? And that's what Chanukah is doing. It's allowing you to taste, not just taste, but to access and make use of the light of the Messianic era. How many people know that? How many people light their candles with this in mind? How many people, celebrate the Chag? I try to have this kavanah when I'm eating my latkes with sour cream or applesauce, but you get distracted by the taste of the latkes and the sufgan and yot and the spinning of the dreidel and the money. It's a big opportunity, massive, important, hugely important. Going back to Ma'aseh Bereshis, you have to be prepared. That's what the Gemara says. It's all in the preparation, just like Shabbos is all in the preparation, and that's what we're doing. That's what the 24 days of Kislev, building up to Chanukah, are all about. It's all the preparation. So I don't know how many people are talking Chanukah at this point, or began talking Chanukah before Kislev and from Rosh Kislev onward, because I think most people just feel that Chanukah begins when it begins. And until that time, you just go shopping for presents and maybe buy some extra oil and get the menorah and like that. But it's more than that. The battle took place during the 24 days of Kislev, and we were finally freed from the oppression of the Greeks on the 25th. So we're in that period of time that's building up to Chanukah, and in order to be able to be there at the time that door opens up, so we can say, yes, I'll take as much as I can, you have to prepare now. And this is all part of that preparation, this mind this thought process and mentality that we have to develop, and that's what we're building. And that's it always comes down to that. We spoke up before, the equation of life. 25 is the light while it's hidden in creation. 36 is the light once it's revealed. Once it's revealed, miracles happen all over the place. You live in a different plane of reality, and the method, the means to get there is something called das, and database, your opinion, your worldview, whatever you want to call it, but it changes everything. A person comes in from the kotel one day, he doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe it, I don't see him, I don't know how to connect to him, so I don't believe in God. He sits down in the class and he starts to change his way of thinking, and it takes in ideas. The person talking to the class, he reads books, he takes in ideas, and as he takes in more ideas and they affect his perspective, then he's able to look at the same thing and see it differently. And the entire time his dust is changing, and as it's changing, he begins to see things that were once invisible to him, and now they become real. And that's one of the painful things about doing tshuva, in a sense. It's the most fantastic process that we have available to us, the biggest miracle of life, and fantastic gift. But when you do it and the people around you don't, and they say, "What do you see? What do you that?" But what? They're looking straight out. Avraham and Yitzchak, they see the Shechina hovering over Har HaMoriah, where the Akedah is supposed to take place, and they're going to go to Chofheit, that light, and Yishmael and Eliezer, I don't know what you see, what they see. I don't know. Are they delusional? Are they I don't know. All I see is clear skies and a mountain. Everything looks normal to me. And people have a difficult time appreciating how it's possible to be looking right at something, even in the physical world. I mean, this happens a lot. You're looking for something, and your mind is not really focused on what you're looking for. And you're thinking about something else. You think you're looking for your car keys, or your safe, or your mask, right? And you're looking around, you can't see it. It's right there in front of your face. You can't see it because of the fact that your mind is someplace else. Your dust is on something else. And when Hagar and Yishmael were sent away finally for good, and they had to leave, and they're in the desert, right? It says the angel came to visit her. Yishmael was dying, he was sick, and Hagar was hopeless and helpless. And it says that her eyes were opened, and she was able to see it well. It doesn't say that there was no well there, and God made a well, which he could do, and that happens too. But it says her eyes were opened, and she saw the well. Well, was the well there, or wasn't the well there? Well, on one level, yes. On one level, no. It depends upon your mentality, depends upon your perspective. And this is the battle, and this is the struggle. How many people are pursuing meaningless lives, thinking this is what life is all about? How many people are going through life thinking, I've got it made? I mean, billionaires, multi-billionaires, millionaires, they have control, they have power. But the most important aspect of life that counts the most, they're missing, because they're not connected to God, or they're not connected to the ultimate purpose, the ultimate reason for us to be here. All comes down to this concept of das, not the kind you clean away with a shmat or something like that, but das, like dot, with the tough at the end, right? And it just means knowledge in general, but specifically it means das Elokim in this context, which means godly knowledge, the knowledge that changes and alters the way that you look at reality, so you can begin to see what's always been there, just we've been blind to it. And that's the difference between somebody who has a Chanukah mentality and someone who doesn't. And ultimately we see that what the goal is to become a Ner Shel Chanukah, a human Ner Shel Chanukah. Sounds a little bit strange, right? I wouldn't suggest lighting yourself on fire, God forbid. It's not we're talking about, that's not the kivun of it. Anyhow, you wouldn't have to. We have to light the menorah, because that's how the miracle was done, and to remind you of the base of Mikdash, the menorah. But that's not what's really it's about. It's the light that is emanated, and that's supposed to come out through us, through our spiritual pores, not our physical pores, but our spiritual pores out to the world, which we are able to do once we have the Das Shel Chanukah. Anyhow, moving forward, okay? We're back to the story of Yosef and his brothers, and after Yosef's brothers saw that their father could not be consoled after the loss of Yosef, as we said before, that's a sign that someone hasn't died. Normally, the Gemara says that God made it that a person can forget someone who's passed away at least 12 months after it's happened. It's the way we survive, how we cope with reality. For some reason, a person cannot be consoled, then it usually is an indication, unless they have an emotional issue, it's usually an indication that the person might not be dead. I don't know if that applies today, but it certainly applied then and to Yaakov Avinu. So once they saw that this was not going to go away, so they began to realize the extent of their mistake. They thought that we'll sell Yosef and we'll save the Jewish people from the impact of Yosef on the Jewish people and the future. And it'll be hard on our father at first, but eventually he'll get used to it. He'll move on, and he'll get used to the fact that Yosef is no longer with us. But that's not what happened to him. And year after year, they tried. Aside from being depressing, it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy for someone to mourn, year after year after year. You have to grow from it, to move on, to make, go on with life. And they saw that it wasn't going to happen, so they realized, we must have made a mistake. This is not working out the way we planned it, and there must be something wrong over here. So the Torah tells us, and Rashi alludes to it, and Rashi explains it to us in next week's Parsha. There's 2 Parshas from now, Parashat Yosef, after the sale takes place. So the brothers, it mentions that the Yehuda went down. It's talking physically, he went to a certain place, he went down, but spiritually he went down. And the Medrash says that, Rashi brings down the Medrash that says that he went down in position. When the brothers saw that Yaakov could not be consoled, they turned to Yehuda and said, listen, you're the leader. You told us to sell Yosef, and we listened to you. If you had told us not to sell Yosef, we would have also listened to you. So therefore it's your fault. You're the one to blame. We're all involved in some level, but we're putting the blame on you over here. So therefore he lost his prominence. He lost his stature. And honestly, that's, it makes perfect sense. And that's what I bought that line for the longest time. And why not? Until the priest Tzaddik came along and explained otherwise. He said, really, that's not the reality. The brothers perceived it that way. Why? Because they went by what they saw. It was at the beginning of the 22 years of Yosef's absence, or 20 years into it, or whatever. But it wasn't at the end of it. They had no idea at that point how everything was going to unfold. But what does Yosef tell them later on? Right? When they're worried, they come to Yosef after Yaakov dies and before the end of the Chumah, the end of Parshas V'chi, Sefer Bereshis, and they lie. They tell Menashe to tell Yosef that our father told us to tell you before he died, not after death, but before he died, that after he dies, that you should not harm us, lest you harbor some ill feeling still against us, which you wouldn't carry out while your father was living. Our father was living, but now that Yaakov's died, maybe you'll feel free to exercise your authority and to cause us harm. That was their concern. So Yosef says, "Ani tachas Elokim, I in place of God," right? So he says to them, "Listen, you intended evil against me, but God designed it, right, for good, in order to bring about what is at present to keep a great populace alive." That's the translation, more or less, of the psukim in Parshas V'yechi. So sounds just like consolation. Don't worry, I harbor no ill feeling. I'm not going to take revenge. I've moved on from that. So don't lie about the situation. Don't panic. You'll be fine. But anyhow, just so you should know, the way I look at it is that it's not about you. It's about Hashem. And Hashem is the one who orchestrates through you. Now, the truth is, it's a little bit tricky because you can't be absolved of your responsibility. God is behind everything, and the good and the bad. But if God chooses you to be the vehicle for the bad, even though it has a good ending to it, you have to ask the question, why me? What did I do to make myself into someone that God could say, hey, over here, I got this nasty job for you, right? You got to worry about things like that. But nonetheless, standing back and looking at the whole thing, right? So as it says, this is the way I look at it. As far as I'm concerned, this was all a good thing because it was all meant to be, right? And not just that, Yosef is telling them, he says that we know that this was meant to be. How do we know? Go back to the beginning. Remember those dreams that you didn't like me about? You got jealous about, you hated me for it. You said, who's you're gonna be the one who's gonna rule over all of us in the end, right? You sold me because of those dreams. Well, that was God's way of telling us what was going to happen in the future. And here it is. There it is. And here it is today. That was the theory. And here's the actual. Here's the fulfillment of those dreams right now. So you see, it was all meant to be. Because just like necessity is the mother of invention, likewise, it's the mother of history too. Things happen in history because it's necessary. Now we look at it like it's just a result. This had to happen because when this guy turned right a little bit too fast, of course his car was in a skid like that and caused it to knock over a sign, which hit the garbage containers and fell into the it's all a result, cause and effect. Well, that's 100% true. It's all cause and effect. But nothing happens by accident. Even the person who's having the accident is not doing it by accident. That's what Yosef is saying. Yehuda, you were the one who made it that you sold me, but look what you caused. Because you went ahead, you sold me, I became viceroy of Egypt. Without your, now it's true that God could have done it other ways. It's not the only way it could have, but that's the way God chose it to happen. And you were the vehicle for that. And you don't like the idea of being that kind of a vehicle, so do some soul searching. But you have to stand back and look at the whole thing as a whole. That there was a reason for all of this. It's not just the result. It's a reason. It's a cause, right? Not only that, let's see how far back this goes, how deep the rabbit hole goes, as they say, right? Come on. How does this happen? Because Yaakov favors Yosef. He's showing, the Torah makes a point of this, that he was the Ben Zekunim. He was a father will often have more rachmanas or, a certain connection to the last born children. It's like, the son of his old age. That's the expression, Ben Zekunim. But everyone knows, good parenting means you don't favor one child over the other. You might like one more because you can't help it because this child's being obnoxious, this child's a nice kid, and it happens in families until they all grow up, and people settle down. But it's very possible that you could like one, but to show favoritism, you're only asking for trouble, especially for the one who you're favoring. Everyone knows that. The Gemara says it because of $2 of clothing, the Jewish people went down to Mitzrayim, all because Yaakov gave Yosef Ksonas Pasim, the coat, that he gave to him, and that caused the brothers to be jealous and hatred and the whole thing like that, and sold him. The Gemara says just because it's $2 of clothing, just see the impact and how things unfold because of the actions, by showing favoritism. Yaakov is a prophet, one of the best ever, biggest ever. He's a prophet of God, right? And he talks to God, and he's like the father of the Shvatim. He's the one who's got the dream of the Sulam, of the ladder in this week's Parashat, and the angels that go on. He knows so much. He confronts Yosef and Yeshli Kol, and he fights with an angel. Who fights with an angel and wins? And he does. And yet, he doesn't know the first thing about parenting. He's got 12 kids. Really more, because he's got daughters too. They had twin sisters too. He's got a big family, 4 wives, all these kids, And yet, okay, so it's true. It's before they started publishing all these books on good parenting, things like that, all psychologists and Freud, But still, he's, and he didn't know. Right? Of course he knew. He would never have done it. He would never have favored Yosef. So why did he do it? He was compelled. Not his fault. He didn't choose to do it. Hashem, this is what the Medrash says. Hashem made Yaakov favor Yosef outwardly more, so the brothers would become jealous, so the brothers would come to hate him, so the brothers would come to sell him, so that he would go down to Mitzrayim, and the family would all follow him down there, and this way, the decree of the Bris Ben Besarim, the special prophecy that Avraham had a while back about being in a strange place, not ours, for 400 years, could finally be fulfilled. Divine providence. I mean, what's going on over here? It's like, you have to stop to wonder, like, do I want this chocolate ice cream? Is it me wanting this, or is God making me want this chocolate ice cream right now? Who's behind what I'm doing? And where's my free will in all this? And Yaakov is being stuck. it gets better. Or worse, depends how you look at it. But really better. It's always for the better. As we say in the Gemara and Brachas, all that God does, he does for the good. What do we mean by that? Well, I'll have to see in a second, but what that actually means. But what about the Greeks? What about the Greeks? Right? Well, nations rise and nations fall, right? But while they're rising, they spread out. I once watched a documentary on Alexander the great military leaders and military strategies, and this was about the spread of the Greek Empire. And they're going, they're moving across. That was the thing in those days. That was the fad, right? You become a leader, take over a nation, and then conquer the world, right? It's like every today. Oh, my son the doctor. In those days, it was my son the conqueror, right? That was what the mothers dreamed of, that their son would one day become a great leader and a conqueror and take over the whole thing, and that's what he did. So Eretz Yisrael is like right there. It's like a doorway to Asia, Persia and Iran, and it's like it's coming by ships, so it's across the Mediterranean. How can you not conquer it? How can you not be part of it? And they came. So it happened to be that the Jewish people were there because that's their land, and the Greeks came with their philosophy, and Aristotle and all that eventually developed into Antiochus at the end, and all the Hellenists who wanted to abandon Judaism and go with the Greeks with their philosophy and way of life because they couldn't handle the Torah way of life. And we got stuck and we were oppressed terribly. And eventually we rebelled, right? And we fought back. And we fought back for a little while. We weren't successful in the beginning. Most of the time we just hid and carried it out, Judaism out in private, secretly. We played the dreidel because one of the reasons, in those days, that's how they fooled the Greeks. Later on, the Romans, they do bows and arrows, but with the Greeks, now they play little games, and they came along and they, what are you doing? I'm playing dreidel, playing a game over here. Oh, okay, go ahead. You can play games. And then when the Greeks would disappear, they start learning once again and do mitzvahs once again. And then, Matisyahu is, it's a Cohen, and he's kind of like, sidestepping the Greeks the entire time until one day he sees a Jew, a Hellenist, sacrificing a pig on a pagan altar with a Greek right by there, and they're all plotting this thing, and he's had enough. He just like, that's it. He loses his cool, becomes a zealot and kills the Jew, and does a Kiddush Hashem in the whole process here, and that begins the whole war, which lasts 24 days until finally the Jews overcome. Then the miracle on the 25th day, they finally are free from the Greeks. They run to the base of Mikdash. They have to build a menorah. There's no menorah at that point in time. They have to find pieces of metal and build the menorah, and they light it. They find one jar. The story, we know the story, right? And that's history. That's the way most people learn history. Obviously God runs the story. He's the one who writes the story. He's the screenwriter. Is going back to Maaseh Bereshis. It's all unfolding as God planned it to unfold, which means basically that God sent the Greeks. He sent the Greeks. He sent the Greeks to the Jewish people. He sent the Greeks to invade Eretz Yisrael and to antagonize the Jewish people and to shut them down. Now, there's two ways to look at this. You can either say that he did this as a punishment, and sometimes that is the case. You abuse it, you lose it. Right, you had the chance to be able to serve God with tremendous pleasure and freedom and resources and all that, but you took it for granted. That's what God says. You'll come into the land, and you'll become overconfident, and you'll forget all the blessing that I've given to you, and you become arrogant and take it for granted, and then you're going to lose it. Right there in Parashat Bechukusai and Parashat Kisavo, I'll take it away from you until you finally appreciate it. So there's the punishment aspect for sure, but there's a better, more important aspect. It'd be nice to know what we're doing here. How many people actually know what they're doing here? I mean, I don't mean tonight, right? Right now you're sitting here watching this presentation, right? But what's my purpose in life? What was it last time? What was the time before that? I'm here to rectify something. I'm here to become something, to fulfill something, and my portion in the world to come, which goes on forever. This world is, we said before, just a corridor. It's a like that. It's gone. It's gone. Right now, it seems to take a long time because we have, life. We're living it. 80, 90 some odd years, but they go by pretty fast too. and it's already like 57:81, and we're almost at the end of the entire thing. And by that point, something has to be fulfilled, has to be accomplished, and I'm part of that. And I can either be a second on the set, get paid a fraction, or I can be a star. I can be, but what's my role? What's my talent? What's my ability? What am I weak in? What I have to fix up? What does God expect from me? So, a long time ago, once upon a time, in the good old days, when we had prophecy, you could go to a prophet and say, who am I? Right? Today you go to a psychologist who's not a prophet, he just makes them, right? And you just, you get, who am I? Oh, let's work it out together. Let's see what we can come up with, and are we accurate? We, close to it? Maybe yes, but a prophet, you ask the prophet and you say, like, what's my ability? Not only that, by the way, but you took your children to a prophet and you say, what's the way to teach this child? What's his path? What's her path? What do they need to, what are they here to fix up? And the prophet would tell you. And that's what it means to teach a child, according to his way. You got that information, and about yourself too. So you can go back and work on yourself. So why did we lose it? It's a long story. As they say, the greater the person, the greater the Yetzer Hara. And there was a great Yetzer Hara back then, much more than today. But still, that's what you could do. Today, we don't have that. Even back then, it wasn't always clear how much God would reveal to the person because you had to still work things out. But that's the way it was. And today, we lose sight of the fact that we're here for a purpose. We wake up in the morning, right? If you're not religious, you go to work if you can today, or stay at home and work at home today. But you just live day to day, and you try to have some level of pleasure that you can say at the end of the day, this was a meaningful day. But how many meaningful days do people actually have? How many people even care about that? As long as I keep the smile on my face, as long as I'm able to enjoy myself, and perhaps one day retire someplace which I'll call paradise, that may not end up being what I think it is, but at least I can plan for it, I can live for it. If you're religious, well, you get up in the morning, you do the religious thing, right? You wash your hands, you go to shul, put on tefillin, light Shabbos candles, Erev Shabbos, you make challahs, and the days become weeks, and the weeks become months, the months become years, and you just hope at the end of it all that there's a cheshbon being made, that somehow, when they finally put me on the scale, right, not the one that checks your weight, right, checks your spiritual weight instead, right, they put you on the scale, that somehow the mitzvahs, the things I did right outweigh the things I did wrong. And that's life for most people. How many people wake up in the morning, they say, what am I here for? What do I need to accomplish? How close am I to that goal? Well, it's kind of hard to do if you don't know what that goal is, but at least if you're thinking about it. And by the way, if you think about it and it is important to you, then God will give you help to figure it out. It's not prophecy per se, but it's a little bit like prophecy. The Talmud says anyhow today that ever since prophecy was taken away from the prophets, that today it resides with the chachamim, with the wise people, with the leaders, right? They have a certain ruach kodesh, a certain amount of prophecy. So go get some eitzah. Go ask some questions. Go find out, do the research. But if you're somebody who's on track I want to know my purpose in life, then God will help you. That's a very important rule to know. But if you don't ask that question, you're not really so concerned, he'll let you drift. And hopefully somehow that will, accomplish. But here's the point. If you're just drifting, like when I plan my day today, okay, I wake up in the morning, I plan to have a great day. I can even see a little bit about what I'm going to do to have that great day, starting with what I eat in the morning, actually before even that, but having good davening. I want to have a good davening, but I can't even control that. Sometimes I go up, I can concentrate, and I'm focused, and I feel healthy, and I feel good, and I feel like in the moment, and I have a great davening. Other times I'm so distracted, it's like I have to fight and so hard, put my finger on the word, and let's say I've got my act together, but the guy who's leading the minyan, right, that we call the Baal Tefillah, the Chazan, he's fast. Boom, 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 and I can't keep up. And I'm constantly having to fix words and change words. Even the mask has changed davening. I don't know about everybody else, but I can tell you, I have to keep pulling it away from my mouth because it keeps getting, I breathe in, get sucked in, cuts off the words, cuts off the last syllable. It's annoying. Did I say it? I did not say it. It was like, and it adds a whole different element that's made davening a much greater challenge. But I can't control that. So did I have a good davening? Maybe yes, maybe no. I come home, right? I have breakfast. Turns out that what I wanted is finished. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not, whatever. But I plan to do things a certain way, but there's so many things that are going to happen in the course of my day that I did not see coming. You get a phone call, changes everything. And it's just, your life is dramatically changed. Sometimes for the bad, sometimes for the good. Your first email of the day was waiting for you for hours, came last night, sitting there, and you open it up, and it's a bill, right? For twice as much as you thought. And then that's life. And we deal with it the best we possibly can. We work our way through it, but we can't have control. But you know something? Here, you have to understand, we may not know what our purpose is in life. We may not know what we're here to accomplish. We may not know what we need to do for the sake of tikkun. But don't forget one thing. God never forgets who you are. You're always on his radar. You're always part of his master plan. He already knows who you are and what you're going to become. And he's always working on your tikkun. As the Gemara says, right? You have Nachum Ish Gamzu. Nachum Ish Gamzu was called Gamzu because he would always say Gamzu L'Tova. He's one of the Rebbes, one of the teachers of Rabbi Akiva. And he was famous for this. And he died horribly in the end, in spite of the fact he was a miracle worker. Miracles happened from him. And everything that happened to him, he always said, Gamzu L'Tova. There's a famous story, with him and the Roman emperor, and the situation looked disastrous and everyone was panicking. He said, no, Gamzu L'Tova. And it worked out well. And how many times in life does that happen? Gamzu L'Tova. But at the end of his life, he died, without limbs, and he was like, literally in terrible, terrible shape. And he caused it to himself to some degree. And the truth is, in the end, it wasn't really his problem. It wasn't really his fault. I mean, yes and no, but I'm not going to go through the whole story now. We spoke about it way back when. But the point is that he always said Gamzu. What do you mean Gamzu L'Tova? Sometimes people are like, Gamzu L'Tova. They don't even mean it. There's an obligation to say it. Just gonna get it through the teeth there, right? And inside is like, how can this be good? It's not what I planned. How can it's not good? And it gets extreme. A person can say Gamzu L'Tova with a good heart. How many times I've caught myself, it takes me like 2 hours before I realize, forgot to say Gamzu L'Tova. So distracted by the negative outcome of something, and so disturbed by what happened, and emotionally it's still getting at me. And I finally calmed down a couple of hours later, and I realized it's all Hashem. It's all Hashem. Hashem has done this. Hashem, Gamzu L'Tova. The other expression, the Gemara, is Kol Mad Rahman Avid L'Tav Avid. Famous story of Rabbi Akiva, who tried to get a room at an inn. Right, he was traveling in the country of Israel, couldn't get a room. It was all booked up, so he decided instead to stay in the field. He had a rooster, and he had a cow, and he had a light. And he that's what he was traveling with in those days, right? Instead of credit cards, you took your rooster and your cow instead. And he had that, and he slept out in the field. The next morning he woke up to go to the town to buy some food or something like that, and the whole town had been pillaged and people had been killed. And but in the middle of the night while he was sleeping, a fox came along and ate his rooster. And something else happened to his cow, I think, or his donkey. His donkey. He was also killed by, I think, a lion ate his donkey. I don't know how the lions skipped over him, but that's what happened. That's the story he says. And his light went out. The wind blew his light out in the end. So everything went wrong. But he said, all that God does, he does for the good. The next morning when he woke up and he went to the town, he saw the town had been attacked. He said, see, I told you, it's all for the good. You know why? Because had my candle been burning, they would have seen that and attacked me too. Had my rooster been alive, he would have crowed and they would have come and get me too. Had my donkey brayed, they would have found me also. All these things happened to save my life. I can always get another donkey, another rooster, and another light, but I can't get another life. So it was all for the good in the end. What does he mean for that? In the end, he also dies a very horrible death at the hands of the Romans. And he still say all that God does, he does for the good. Because you know what the words mean? The words mean that God never loses sight of my tikkun. He never loses sight of what I need to become. He always knows what's best for me at any given moment that I've got to go through to accomplish something. So if this thing has happened to me, it's to bring something out that I was not previously aware of or I wasn't motivated to do. So for example, as the priest explains based upon Chazal, that the time of the Greeks was a time that the Torah was meant to come out, the oral law. There was an explosion of Torah Shebal Peh, of the oral law. It had to come into the world. That light was destined since my separation to come at that time. But the Jewish people were not doing it. It's only once the Greeks came and caused all this suffering and all this adversity that pushed us, right? Adversity changes people. It can make them worse, but a lot of times it makes people better. It makes people accomplish things. So, it becomes the reason. This adversity, this takala, this stumbling block, this thing that happened in my life that I didn't ask for it. God just sent it. Why now? Why this? I was like, it's painful. It's not, I was going this way and now I'm being forced to go this way and it happened, this guy, stuck at this airport because there's a snowstorm that wasn't supposed to happen. It's the middle of the summer and it still snowed. And here I am stuck, Because, as Rabbi Kiva says, we may not always be working on our tikkun. We may not always be, aware of how to use our time for that purpose, but God always is. And everything he sends at all times is for that. And that's what it means. It's for the good. You can just change the words. All that God does to me in my life is for the sake of my tikkun. It's the sake of changing history in a positive way that had to be changed at this time. The Chanukah story did just accidentally happen at that time in the 36th century from Ma'aseh Bereshis. It did just because that's what was going on and that was the salvation. No, it's because ever since Ma'aseh Bereshis, Chanukah was meant to happen at that time. But we weren't in the proper position to make it happen. We weren't with the proper mentality because we're humans. And there's other layers of divine providence involved. So what does God do? He creates scenarios, events that from our perspective are inconvenient. But from God's perspective, it's exactly what had to happen at that moment. Imagine you go to the Makolit to buy something. You're making a special chicken that requires a certain type of sauce. And you remember seeing it at the Makolit. And you go to the Makolit to go buy it. And 15 seconds before you reach for it, somebody else does. And it's the last one. And they won't give it up. Hard to believe that moment in time was already decreed back at the beginning of creation. That person who went to the Makolit, who bought that thing at the last, it goes all over the place. Just like Yaakov was made to love, so this person in their house was made to cook a certain type of chicken that would require a certain type of sauce. So they go to the Makolit and buy the sauce that you need because that's your tikkun. Sounds menial? Sounds like, trivial? No, it's not. Because it changes something and you feel like, oh, now what? Now what do I do? It stops you, makes you think, right? So if a person cuts himself off from tikkun, meaning there's somebody who basically says, their mind's not into it. There's no matter what God's going to do, they're not going to pay attention. They're going to see divine providence as coincidence, as happen chance. They're going to see it as things that just, history is just meandering through time like a river and flowing, and events happen, and that's just the way it is. And if you're lucky, you're not in the line of fire. If you're unlucky, well, then hopefully you'll find a way to solve the problem, fix it. So then God will say, okay, that person, I can't work with a person like that person. We'll use them as a second on the set, but we're not going to make a star of this person unless they have certain qualities that's inside, they're latent and they need to be brought out. Then maybe God will wake this person up. How many times have people, been almost nobodies? Like no one knew about them. They didn't even know about themselves. And then something happened and forced an issue and, woke up something inside them and changed them forever. This goes on a lot throughout the history. But if somebody is into tikkun, somebody who is prepared to make the effort to work on themselves, to accomplish, they're saying to God, listen, you and I both know I'm here for a reason. I'm here for a purpose. And if you can plug me in, I'd be grateful. I can't always figure it out. And all of a sudden, now here's the Coral Reef of the entire thing. Let's say that I need financial help because something has happened that I didn't plan for, and now I got to pay a bill. But I know it's all for the good. I know it's all for my tikkun. It's not about the money. It's not about the situation. That's just the context. This is the pretext. What's called the lilus in Kabbalah. That's just the means that God's using to get to me. It can be a family relationship. It doesn't make it. It could be a business proposition. It could be the weather. It could be news you hear from 6,000 miles away. Whatever it is. It could be news that you hear about someone's family that you haven't seen for 45 years, but you knew them, and someone, your age or younger has passed away, unfortunately, and it affects you inside. It makes you think. The Gemara says that when somebody is affected by the death of somebody, it doesn't make a difference too. They should look at like an arch where all the stones are like a Roman arch, the round arch. Every stone leans on the other stone. Take out one stone and the whole arch becomes weak, and all the stones can fall. So if you're affected, you're impacted a little bit, a lot, you're meant to be impacted, not just accidentally happen to spill over into your life. God took that person in that way because that's the way you're affected, and she's affected, and he's affected for the sake of tikkun. It's all for the sake. So the Coral Reef is, okay, if that's the way God works, if he's always working on my tikkun, and all the events of my life, the good ones and the comfortable ones and the uncomfortable ones, are all for the sake of my tikkun, not just because things are happening in history and I happen to be an innocent bystander, who got affected by them, right? But it's for the sake of tikkun. How does God orchestrate that? How does he do it? How does he bring together 100 people into one room or into one life and have an event happen that affects every single person on a personal level for their personal tikkun? How does it happen? How does he do that? He's God, One of the advantages of being God is you're infinite. I can't imagine choreographing such a thing. Somewhere I'm going to have to make a mistake. A lot of places. I mean, just the thought process to carry out a conspiracy, it's not simple. Just even look what's going on today, right? With all the conspiracy theories to do with coronavirus, about the vaccine. I don't know, what to believe. But one thing is for sure is that if there's a conspiracy, they couldn't cover it up. They couldn't keep it quiet because there's too many details. Look at the Twin Towers, right? So many people bring lots of evidence to say it was an inside job, wasn't an outside job. Why? Because all this evidence starts to leak out. All these questions start to arise. It's very hard for us to coordinate events in such a way that, there's not going to be some type of spilling out or mistakes made along the way. Lots of mistakes are made along the way, but not God. He's perfect. He can orchestrate a world with 8 billion people, that every one of those 8 billion people simultaneously are getting what they need to do for the sake of their personal tikkun, or to contribute to the world's tikkun. That's what God can do. You can't get your head around that. It's understandable because it's basically unfathomable. But that's God. You know, that's what he's able to do that. And all the stories and somehow make it all work out. It's part of the advantage of being above time, by the way, right? The past, present, and future are all one for the same thing, because one of the reasons why we make mistakes is because we don't know how things are going to unfold. I don't know the future. I'm just guessing. I'm trying to manipulate the future by manipulating the present. Can't really do much about the past, right? But at least, you know, the present and the future, yeah. But I don't know. I can make mistakes, but not God. He's already there. He's in the future already. So therefore he can do all that. But that's what he's always doing. He's constantly working for the sake of a person tikkun. If a person understands that and says, okay, God's after my tikkun, that's what he wants. That's all he wants. Everything else is just, you know, just side issue and distraction. He's after my rectification. So let me think about this for a second. I went through that. What did it bring out of me? When I had this experience, what did it change in me? What was my, you know, how did I use it in a positive way? Because that's what God wanted. Not like God said, well, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen. Wow, that's a good thing. Wow, I'm so glad he did that to him. Look at he became. You know, or ooh, I didn't plan for that one. That's a kind of a negative event. Nah, it's like he's an archer who hits his target every single time. So if I can figure out in advance what I need to rectify, and I can find a path to that rectification, then I can spare myself those God-given events that might be sent to me to accomplish that. You know, it says, the Medrash says that just like Yosef said, Ani Yosef, I'm Yosef, and all the brothers couldn't talk. You know why? Because when they saw that it was Yosef and his dreams had come true and were fulfilled, so they realized that for 22 years they've been living a lie, making a mistake. But my Rosh HaShavua, right, pointed out that was a biddy situation. It was not the ideal circumstance. Yosef revealing himself, why did he hold back? Why did he hold back? Because he was hoping the brothers would guess he was Yosef. He was giving them hints. As Yehuda says to Yaakov, Yaakov says, well, why did you tell him about your brother Binyamin? He said, what do you want from me? The man knew everything about us. He even knew the wood that our cribs were made from. That's how much he was able to know stuff. So, you know, what can we, but then why'd you tell him? Let him find it for himself. If he knows it, let him, but why'd you tell him? Right? Why'd you talk about that? That's when Yaakov realized there's no prophets amongst the Egyptians. And Neil Kamenzi doesn't help with things like that. Something is very strange and fishy. You know, and I remember Yosef's dreams way back, you know, I got a hunch. And I'm not gonna tell my sons right now because they wouldn't even believe me anyhow. And Yosef must be up to something for the sake of their tikkun. So I'm not gonna say, but yeah, Meraglim Atem, he says to his brothers, you guys are spies. No, we're 10 brothers that came together from different gates, you know, because we didn't cause iron hard to buy food and find a brother who was sold in slavery 22 years ago. No, Meraglim Atem, you're spies. So the Sefer Brissi Shalom says Meraglim is a Roshi Tevis. Each of those letters stands for something. Meraglim, Mem, Resh, Gimel, Lamed, Yud, Mem, right? Mem, Mi'imi, Resh, Rocho, Gimel, Genavtem. You stole me from my mother Rocho, Lamed, the Midyanim, Yud, Yishmalim, Mem, Mechartem. From my mother Rocha, you stole me, to the Midianites, and then to the Yishmaelim, you sold me. Hi guys, it's me, Yosef. You're a soul brother, right? The slave, once upon a time, the would-be ruler right now, that's me. He's sending them all kinds of flags. So the Or Chaim says, it mentions in the verse, they did not recognize Yosef twice. Well, they didn't, it says twice, they didn't recognize him. Why the 2 times? So the first time, because physically he was different. He was older now. 22 years is a long time. He didn't have a beard when he left. Now he's a beard. Plus, he was probably wearing all kinds of Egyptian makeup. You know, they dressed kind of weird in those days in Egypt. as a leader, right? So but the second time, the Or Chaim says, because their mind couldn't grasp it. But had they been able to grasp it and realize all the divine providence, so then they would have said, wait a second, are you Yosef? Right? Before you go ahead and say who you are, let's guess who I am. Okay? Oh, Yosef, right? Because who else would know what our cribs are made from? Who else would put us through the ringer like this? Who else? And besides, you had this dream about being a ruler one day, it was a prophet. Who else? It's got to be Yosef. Good. So my Rosh Hashanah said, had that if that happened like that, the Mashiach would have come. That would have been the tikkun for the brothers right there on the spot. But they didn't. Instead, they kept going with the same, narrative that our brother's missing. This is a viceroy, and it's nothing to do with our brother, but weird nonetheless. And that pushes off the Gula. So the Medrash says, just like that, on Yom Adin, on the day of judgment, everybody will stand before God, and God will only utter two words, Ani Hashem. I am Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And that will be the whole judgment. Nothing else will need to be said. Why? Because it will show us retroactively everywhere God was in our life doing stuff to help us out, and we ignored it, and we didn't pay attention. See, Elohim is the God that works through nature. Hashem is the God who works above nature, reveals. He's the one who does the splitting of the sea and the 10, the giving of Torah and the 10 plagues. That's Havai, that's Hashem, and he'll bring the final redemption too. So that's what the prophet says. On that day, God will be one, and his name will be one. Ani Hashem. And we'll be speechless because we won't be able to believe that was you. That thing, that person there, and I was yelling at you, and I embarrassed you, and I panicked. It was all you the entire time. Yep. And that'll be the din. But, says the Medrash, tzaddikim, or the Medrash says, but tzaddikim, they won't go that far. They won't get to the point where Hashem has to say Ani Hashem. Before Hashem says Ani Hashem, they're Atah Hashem. Why? Because we saw you there, and we saw you there, and we saw you there, and we saw you all through our lives. Every moment of time, we constantly saw you, no matter what it was that was happening, no matter how big it was, no matter how scary it was, no matter how dramatic it was, no matter how entertaining it was, no matter how distracting. We never lost sight of it. It was always you. We were aware of that. You sent the Greeks. You sent the Romans. You sent the Babylonians. You sent the Nazis. All of them you sent. Did I like it? No. But what am I going to do? If I had figured out in advance what I was supposed to get out of all of that in advance, I could have done those changes, made those tikkunim, and avoided all of that instead. Because whatever God plans for your life, whatever God plans for history, it's going to come true. It's going to happen exactly the way it has to. The only question is going to be, are we going to get with the program, or are we not going to get with the program? Now, why is it so important? Aside from the obvious reasons, aside from the fact that that's the purpose of life, and that's our tikkun, because as the Pri Tzaddik points out, there's two things we're doing at this stage of history, at this time of history, especially towards the end. Time's running out. We're at the end, whether it's hard to believe or not, but the Gula is at hand. We're already in that mode, without question, if you know the signs. But aside from all of that, what's the point? Well, we're talking about becoming conduits, the Or HaGanuz. We're talking about being able to access this incredibly holy light that God made creation with which Adam could see from one end of the world onto the other end of the world. We're talking about becoming people whose lives are ruled by the positive 11, so that we can look at God's world with the light is hidden and reveal it like Yaakov Avinu and make the 36. That's what we're after. All of it. That's the whole point. That's what we're trying to achieve. But I can't do that without the Or HaGanuz. I can't do that without that light. And I can't have that light unless I'm a fitting vessel for it. I have to become a container. Remember the halacha, right? The halacha is for the half an hour that the candles are burning for the sake of the mitzvah, you can't use them. You can't be nen. You can't get pleasure from them, meaning you can't read from them, can't get your money by them, right? Just let the mitzvah burn and let the light emanate. Why? Because as the lesson points out, that light that God hid at the beginning of creation, you can't go after it. It has to go after you. It has to come to you. And it only comes to you when you become a fitting vessel, a fitting container for it, like the pach shemen, like that little jar that Yaakov found in this week's Parsha when he went to anoint the Mitzvah, right? Because he had the dream. Oh, this is the house of God. This is the gate of Shemayim. Let me build a monument. And when we Jews build monuments, we like to anoint them. But what can I do? I didn't bring my Shemen Zayis with me. Oh, look at that. One of the stones has a little jar of oil stuck to it. My lucky day in the middle of nowhere. And I take this jar of oil and I pour it over the monument and I look back in the jar of oil and the oil's there. So I poured it myself and the oil's there. And Yaakov says, it is fitting I take this oil with me, this miraculous oil that's going to be used in Tanakh over and over again to miracle after miracle with the oil, where it just keeps burning more and more and more. We'll talk, the pre-tzedek itself, he brings up the question, not the pre-tzedek, pardon me, it was it's been Rabbi Karp Sefer, but what was the big deal about the oil in the first place? The miracle of the oil was there for hundreds of years. As the Talmud points out, the Western candle, we have a Ner Tamid in Shul, right? What's the Ner Tamid? Why is it called Ner Tamid? Because the Western candle of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash was Tamid. He put a certain amount of oil in it, and every day it burned longer. Then all the other ones went out when the oil was depleted, but not the Ner Marvi, because it was the siman, it was the sign that God resides amongst the Jewish people. That little miracle. So then what's the miracle? What's the big deal about the Shemen Zayis? Time of Chanukah. So it burns 7 extra days. Big deal. We've seen it before. Okay, well, the second temple versus the first temple, it wasn't the fact that it burned the 7 extra days. That's not what amazed everybody. That wasn't the point. That was just a siman. It was a sign. Impressive, 100%, and we're so excited. Oh, we're so happy. You got to pay for something, and it turns out that you have more than enough money to pay for the thing. I'm grateful for that. So I have all the Shemen Zayis. Wow, I'm so excited. But make a holiday? No, that wasn't the point. The point is that when the oil burned for the 7 extra days, that was God saying, "I'm amongst you," because since you were real with me. Since you believed it was from me and I wanted something from you, and therefore you used this event specifically to bring that out in history, I can share this light with you now. A whole different madrig, whole different level now. And that's what we're all trying to achieve. That's the whole goal. There's 2 approaches to life, 2 approaches to crisis. You can be, just minding your own business and doing your own thing. And unfortunately, bad things happen to good people or decent people. Things go wrong. There are accidents. And I didn't want to cope with them and deal with them, and survive them. Or you can say, it's about tikkun from the time I'm born to the time I die. All that God does is for the sake of my tikkun, for my rectification. It's kind of a game in a sense. I wonder what he's going to send next. You know what? Better yet, let me figure out what I got to fix, what I have to rectify. And then I can head him off at the pass. Instead of him saying, Ani Hashem, I can say, Atah Hashem. I know what I'm here for. At least I know what I'm supposed to do to figure out what I'm here for. And let me work on it. Let me focus on that. Let me become a vessel for that light. And then God says, fantastic. No need to stress you out. No need to put you through the ringer. You're already working what you have to work on. And that's what Chanukah says. That's part of the message of Chanukah. It's not just that we had a victory of the Greeks. No, God sent the Greeks to bring something out. And Chanukah says we did it. We brought it out. And then it says one step further. Now figure out what it was and what's missing, and you could avoid the next thing. We didn't do that, unfortunately. There's not enough people. We didn't go that far with the message. But here we are thousands of years later with another opportunity every year to do that on a personal level, on a national level. And as the priest points out, and many Meforshim point out, that every individual is like a nation unto themselves. You can achieve redemption, even if the rest of the nation doesn't, even while they're not. Take the message to heart, Hashem, and you become the master. You become the vessel for that light, and you become a Ner Shel Chanukah, which, God willing, we'll talk about more in the weeks to come.